All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. We'll not finish all these conversations tonight, but it's a conversation that continues for quite some time. You have until the 20th to give your memorandum to the National Assembly. We were talking about the pay as you earn for people who earn more than 500,000 and above at 35%. Kwame, is this overtaxation in your view, or is this prudent? Well, I think it is. I think it is. It's a tax grab. So let me tell you why. Now, according to the economic survey published last week, there are only 350,000 Kenyans who earn 100,000 shillings and above. 350,000? Yes, 100,000 shillings and above per month. Now, that's about 12% of all the people in the formal sector employment. Yeah. Even if you assume that half of them, and it's unlikely because the higher up you go, the fewer of them who would be at that level. Even if you assume that it's half of them, and that's the calculation that I made this afternoon because you asked me, the amount of money, the amount of extra money that you receive is 4 billion for the whole year. 4 billion for the whole year is equivalent to 10 hours of public spending. So I don't know that you're really solving much. Now, you might say that they can afford it and they should. Fine, that's okay. But the point is, these are the people who also have many sources of income and were most capable of employing tax planners to ensure that they reduce their tax liability. So I don't know what problem is being solved. And that's what tells me that this taxation plan in Kenya, rather the finance bill that we have, is actually just making for a more incoherent tax structure. Okay. So it's a small amount of people. You will get that. And I think one of the things that perhaps we should have done through this taxation is actually to tax consumption, because this government wants to encourage savings. These are the kind of people, everybody actually. If you tax less of incomes, people actually have a greater incentive to save and to work. Yeah. But what it is now, I think it's just basically a tax grab. Every single person we want to get money from, we simply raise taxes here. I also think that Kenya Kwanza is playing a very bad game. Taxation policy should be based on the fact that as Kenyans, we are citizens, we have an obligation to pay our taxes to support the public fiscus. The argument that is being made that there are some rich people and they are bad people and therefore let's punish them with taxes, it's not clever. Yeah. In addition to the fact that I think it's just making taxation policy unnecessarily covered with political rhetoric and not this. The tax bands that we have in Kenya are actually very many. So there's 0 for people who earn less than 10,000 shillings, and then we have 10% between 10,000 to 14, and then we have 25% and then 30%. So you are already at 30% by the time you are earning 38,000 shillings. So raising 35% for people who earn 35 and above, in my view, is, one of 500,000 and above, is my view just political signature, signaling. Yeah. If we'd wanted to raise taxes, we could have placed a 37, we could have placed maybe 32.5 for everybody above 100 or there and actually received more money than this. So this is just signaling, and it's a very poor tax design if the intention is to collect more taxes without causing distortions. Yeah. Honorable Kuria, I know you mentioned this is akin to taxing the rich, but when the disposable income shrinks even more, isn't the domino effect more people losing jobs and no disposable income, no money in circulation? Isn't this counterproductive?
When you hear Kwame call this a political signature and a political rhetoric, it's rather sad because every time there's an attempt to tax those people that are high up in the tax bracket, we always get to do this, and we always get to hear this. However, when everyone, it is even the ones that are getting 200 and 300 shillings per day, working in our farms or in households, get to pay VAT and excise duty and all these other taxes, it's not overtaxation. So even if there were 100,000 people or 20,000 people, and we're able to collect much more from them, and remember, let's not just think about those people that are earning 500,000 shillings. We have quite a number of Kenyans who earn 5 million shillings a month, who earn 10 million shillings a month. And so if we are able to collectively bake the cake and collect more from as many of Kenyans as we can, and especially most importantly for those that have the ability to pay. Because remember, one of the principles of taxation is the people that have the ability to pay should actually pay more. And that's not punishing them. It's only fair for us to do that. And in addition to that, we're not just touching these particular brackets. For the very first time, we are the second country after Salvador to introduce withholding tax on fintechs, on bitcoins, and on cryptocurrencies, because we have seen a change in the world where people are no longer operating with bank accounts or even with like M-Pesas and Airtel money, but you have also a lot of trade happening around Bitcoin technology, about cryptocurrencies, and these are fintechs that are here with us. So we are not just touching the rich or those people that are earning 500,000 shillings and above, but you are also going for these new technologies so that we do not make them to be illegal. We now that they're here with us, to make sure that they get to do the business without being disturbed by any of these agencies, but they also get to pay their rightful share of tax. Trevor, we have thought about a plan to make sure we simplify our tax payment. Unfortunately, what my good friend Kwame is talking about, the rich being able to hire tax consultants to be able to evade taxes, we also have a lot of small businesses or medium businesses that are willing to pay the rightful share of tax. But the complications around whether you are calculating the deductible deductions and what is tax allowable or not is too complicated. And that's why the finance bill now actually proposes that a one-off turnover tax of those with a turnover between 500,000 shillings and 15 million shillings at 3%. So that if your sale per month is 1 million shillings. If you have your business in town and you sell and your sales are 1 million shillings a month, you pay by the 20th of every month 3% of that. 3% of 1 million shillings is 30,000, and that become a one-off tax. You don't have to worry about someone asking you whether you have compliance or this or compliance that. It's about simplifying our tax processes so that we make sure that especially those people that are at the bottom of the pyramid and the small and growing businesses actually get to contribute to the national revenue without having to go through all the complications of taxes. Trevor, we have even introduced for the very first time that on the tax refunds, because when we listen to businesses, government were very quick to take money in terms of the taxes from businesses, but very slow to refund. So tax refunds have been a big headache to most of businesses in this country. What have we done to them? We have provided a solution and saying, when the taxman does not refund your tax refund, then you're allowed to deduct them from your next tax payment. And what was happening before, if KRA came and gave you an assessment and said you have to pay, you have 10 million, if you claimed a refund of 10 million shillings, but the following week you owe the same KRA another 10 million shillings, you had to pay the 10 million shillings, and it did not allow you to trade off or to take off the 10 million shillings that was owed to you by the taxman through the amount of money they are claiming as a tax from you. And all these measures are to make sure that we simplify our tax processes. We make sure that the taxes that are refundable to you, if the funds are not, if the money is not refunded to you, then you actually take them off your next tax payment. So we are doing our best to make sure that we have a simplified tax system that is understandable to everyone, and that someone doesn't need to spend so much money sometimes to hire tax consultants to do. If you fall under the bracket of a turnover between 500,000 and 15 million shillings, you pay that one check once a month and you're good to go. Okay,
let's take a look at what's going on our wall here and see what else other proposal that is there. It's most likely about the tax issue. Excise duty, 5% on wigs, human hair, false beards, eyebrows and eyelashes, imported cellular phones, imported fish, powdered juice, imported paints. Kwame, is this okay? Because some people say this is luxury. It's not a must-have. Well, I could have had beards by now, but it's not a must-have.
Well, yes, I mean, there's, you know, the excess tax policy in Kenya has been one of the most, quote-unquote, I say confused advisedly, because we almost apply excise taxes to anything. So for instance, imported cellular phones, I don't know what it is we are protecting because we don't have domestic production of cellular phones. Rarely, right? I mean, there's a small industry, but it's not much out there. I don't know why we should have an excise tax on imported fish when the fish that is produced in the country is not even sufficient to meet internal demand. So there's nobody you're protecting. But more importantly, excise duty is usually used as a tax to discourage bad habits, consuming some beverages or certain things that people smoke that are damaging to health. So government uses them not as a source of revenue, but as a way of actually reducing public consumption of those things. So when we see cellular phones and human hair, I don't know that government wants us to all be bald, and imported cellular phones, it just tells you why we think, while Honorable Kuria says that this has been a simplification, it's actually complicating taxes because the logic of excise duty and the goods for which it is being applied do not fit together.
Yeah. Joy, because this is akin to what they call sin tax, right? It's a luxury that you don't really require. It's not a basic need.
This is a general trend we are seeing in this tax bill. The policies, I mean, there is obvious defiance of basic economic principles. Even before we come to this one, tell me something. I'm sure Professor Nti knows something about the paradox of thrift or something about this idea that if you insist so much on savings and you couple that with high taxation, that is contractional taxation policy at the same time like they're doing now, it's likely to depress the same economy that they're trying to save. That is a basic economic principle that has been disregarded right there. Same thing to this. I mean, what is the justification of having a sin tax on human hair? What is so sinful about a wig? But I know the thinking was not that. They don't care about economic principles. It's about money and raising money for the purpose of it. So if you try to put so much economic thinking into this, we won't find any. And that's where the problem is. Like we're trying to find something which is not there, which was not meant to be there. The purpose is simple. We want money, we are going to raise it whichever means possible. What is so sinful about fish, about juice? So at the end of the day, I think the government needs to go back, the advisors need to go back, and at least discuss about the basic economic principles, because at this rate, they will manage the economy in a way that things get out of hand and you go back to something about late 80s, early 90s, where anywhere else was better than being in Kenya.
Yeah.
They should not take us back there.
All right. Let me bring in Honorable Kuria on this. Honorable Kuria, when you increase taxes on most products, don't you inadvertently then affect demand? Therefore, what you're trying to do by getting more revenue from it, you actually lose. You go to the opposite direction.
Yeah, but just a quick rejoinder on this excise duty and it being a sin tax or not. We have excise duty on airtime. We have excise duty on bank transactions. We have excise duty on mobile transfer transactions. So when you have excess duty on human hair and all those nails that you're doing and all those other beauty products that you're doing, I don't see anything wrong with it. Because we have a duty. Again, let me take you back where we said, Trevor. I have not had any of the conversants you've had telling us, then how do we raise revenue for this country? Or do we want to go and borrow and get auctioned like we were almost getting auctioned by borrowing, where our airports, for example, Jomo Kenyatta Airport, our ports were being used as collateral for our loans? Or do we want to get creative and find out if we want to buy a human hair of 100,000, then please pay some tax on it. Because even the person who is buying airtime, Trevor, pays excise duty. The person who is sending money home, the person who is doing a bank transaction is actually paying excise duty. And that's why I said in the beginning, when we touch on those products that touch on particular classes of people, then it becomes a very hot conversation. But when there is VAT on milk, when there is VAT on bread, then you don't hear this particular thinking going like that. So I strongly feel that if I want my wife to wear human hair, then I should not complain that there is a tax on it. I should be able and willing to pay an extra money for it. But even looking at what other things we have done, and I'm really trying to make time and talk about this. For example, penalties and interest. Trevor, we have many people that, for example, when they in university started a company with the hope of getting a government tender or doing a particular business. A few years down the line, that company never made any money, but that company incurred interest and penalties. And as such, even when they try to apply for any government tenders or any other jobs right now, they can't get any because they cannot get a tax compliance certificate because they have penalties and interest. We have created in this bill an amnesty for all outstanding penalties and interest as long as there is no principal involved. So if you registered your company when you are in university or in college 10 years ago, and this company has never done business, and you have been slapped with all these fines for not filing returns and all, you are giving you a fresh slate, a fresh start. We are saying apply for amnesty, and as long as there is no principal tax to be paid, you are going to get the amnesty and are going to be tax compliant. Even the ones, and especially during COVID, because we had a lot of businesses struggle during COVID. We had some very good business companies who just continued to pay salaries to their employees, even when they were not collecting any revenues. And as such, you find they have been in arrears for their payee, for example, for the employer's contribution of pay, or even the payee's contribution, because we're not making enough. We are telling them that there is a space for you, there is room for you. There is amnesty, apply for the amnesty, come pay the principal, and we are going to waive off the interest and penalties. And that way, the tax debt that you have of around 1.9 trillion shillings out there, we are going to have a solution to it, and you're going to give another chance to our Kenyans and businesses, especially young people, who most of them went to register companies when they were in school without knowing the tax repercussions of it, a fresh slate of life. But Kuria, so when I hear people saying that we do not know what we're doing, or this factor, or these particular policies are not good, then there are very many things that are very good in this. For example, this particular. But Kuria, isn't this what like to support?
Kuria, isn't this what Kwame was saying, that some of the policies raised there don't seem to be cancelling out each other? Because it is in that same finance bill that if you're slapped with a demand from KRA, you have to deposit 20% of it as the case is being had. So even if you have a company that has started and never did any business, but there's a claim from KRA, first you have to deposit the 20% before this conversation on waiver is even had.
Trevor, there are very many, especially the large businesses in this country, that when they are supposed to pay their tax obligation, and remember, by the time it's going to the tax tribunal, there are very many internal resolutions at KRA itself, at National Treasury, that has an avenue for you to argue your case. And most of these taxes, and that's why, for example, we really simplify these particular tax laws so that these cases become a black and white thing. But the number of cases that we have in court, I would not like to mention some of them here, is that when they have been given a tax invoice, the first thing, instead of because they don't want to pay, they go and get a court order, for example. So we have cases of taxes that have been ongoing on court since 2008. So for 14 years, you have been, someone owes KRA 1 billion shillings, and because now they know they can invest all the money to delay the cases in court, 14 years later, we have not collected that particular tax. And even when it is awarded, then it appears to be very unfair that you're asking these people to collect all this money at once. So what you're saying, if the case is really genuine, and again, we are retraining even our KRA to make sure that it is a business-friendly environment where we can have a conversation, where we can have an understanding. We are simplifying our tax law so that it is clear what is supposed to be paid and when. So that when now it becomes a problem and you want to manipulate the process by going to court so that you do not pay your share, fine, it is okay, but deposit 20%. If you win the case, you get your money back.
Okay.
But we really want to discourage this issue of abuse of the legal justice system to make sure that these people do not pay taxes, because it has been an easy out. And if you did a research on those number of cases, like they are in hundreds, and they're not with the small businesses. They're in the large businesses that do know the easiest way to avoid paying their rightful share of tax is to take a case to court, obtain a court order, and take all the time that they can and go on with their business. Whereas the small taxpayers that pay their PE, that pay their VAT, pay it on time and without having to go through a court process.
All right, Kwame, this excise issue, before I take views.
Well, I think then if the intention is to actually tax goods because we think they're luxury goods and you're calling it excise tax, then it's the wrong tax. So maybe we should just call it a sales tax and introduce a sales tax and make everything simple. Because we need to call something by its right name, because part of national conversation is to use the correct names. It's not to say I can call it what I want, but apply whatever name, because then we confuse each other. Yeah. So that's basically it. And Honorable Kuria, we agree. There are elements of trying to simplify taxation. We agree, and compliance. But it is also clear that in the same tax, you give with one hand and then you make the tax code even more complicated, where the compliance costs again will get us here. I think you need to, in my view, and you haven't asked my advice, but let me tell you this because you chair an important committee of the National Assembly. I think a conversation around taxation, whether you own a small business or a big business, they are citizens. The very harsh rhetoric that I see against big businesses is not good for employment, it's not good for investment, it's not good for the national tax agreement, because there was a draft tax policy which Treasury actually opened up before the new administration came in, and a couple of weeks back asked for public commentary, and it was very welcoming in terms of getting everybody's views. That is the way we should try as much as is possible to do that. Remember finally that if you come as students of economics, and that's all we know, so maybe you should balance it, every tax has an effect on the business. A tax is not something that a business has kept money in a stash in a vault. Maybe politicians do, but businesses don't keep money in a vault thinking that somebody will come to claim it tomorrow and I'll cut out a check to them. So when you insist that a business must pay, just because there's a claim, a business must pay 25% of it upfront, it may not be there. And that's part of the reason why the business is in court. So what you're saying is you'd rather close regardless of whether you actually can afford to pay that or not. So this tone is what I say, and I know Honorable Kuria, I actually think that if you all asked for it, the risk for a big business to actually skive tax and end up being closed is too large. But the belief that big businesses are run by crooks is something I think we need to correct. It's not bad. It's not good vibes. Okay. You're dealing with businesses in the same rhetoric that you deal with your political opponents. The economy is one, guys. Please, take a chill pill.
Okay, Joy, before I take views from the people.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
And perhaps, Trevor, okay.
Let Joy finish, then I'll come to you, Kuria.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Kwame that the idea that you have to deposit 20% of what is disputed in hand funds maybe it's not possible for big businesses. They don't have that kind of liquidity. So at the end of the day, you might end up forcing a lot of businesses to close down. Yeah. Because if you demand that they have to pay even before their case is heard, then they'll have no choice. If they can't pay and you take legal action against them, they have no choice but to wind up. And then what will you do? What will you have at the end of the day? Yeah. People lose their jobs. The country loses even much more in terms of other taxes. So at the end of the day, it's a policy that's likely to cancel something which is well-meaning. Yeah, but something Kuria raised here, which we are yet to answer, he says that how do we raise revenue for a country that is struggling economically? You're the economist, Kwame. Yes,
I think that one of the things that we should understand is that this is a country where the income per capita, that means the income, the value created over a whole year, if you distribute it by the number of Kenyans, is 247,000, could be less or a little more, 247,000 per person. The government already takes in close to 70,000 shillings per person. That's what we need to know. So what we need to ask ourselves is how much money are you prepared to take on an average per person's head to run government? It's not a lot because Kenyans spend 48% of their income buying food. So the moment you're taking more money from people, you're asking them either to eat less or to skip meals. So when we have, so that's the first thing. The second thing is taxation should be very, very simple. And I agree if you intended to simplify taxes. Very, very simple. It should be based on a national compact. We all are citizens of Kenya, and we need to. The scaremongering about you people are hiding money and you people are crooks when you run it, I don't think that's good for us. I just don't think that's good. It works on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
It's not a good discussion to bring to the economic table. Okay. So maybe that needs to be changed as well.
All right. Kuria, you wanted to jump in before I take views from the people now?
Trevor.
Yes.
You've raised a very interesting question. How do we raise taxes in a struggling economy? And we talked about the cost of running the country. We have a constitution that creates for us 47 counties. We have a constitution that mandates and and states the minimum share that should be sent to these particular counties. We have millions of homes, I repeat, that still do not have connection to power grid. We have most of our roads that are not impassable. We have a lot of our people that do not have access to clean water. We have a responsibility to create jobs because we are actually producing more in terms of our birth rate than how much we are taking, than how much we are absorbing into productive jobs. So we really have a responsibility to make sure this country works, and we are the ones who are mandated to do this particular job. And that's why we are going all these our ways to make sure how creative can we get, if it's touching the cryptos, if it's touching the bitcoins, if it means even not touching some of the taxes that we feel are very bad for business, like the inflation adjustment that was very good, bad for business. If you had more time would have gone through the investment deductions that we are giving to manufacturers, whether in pharmaceuticals, in agriculture, in pesticides, in vaccines, to make sure that we are able to attract foreign domestic investment into this country, so that we can have our more factories, we can have more manufacturers, and therefore create more jobs for our people. And I'd like to assure Kenyans, and especially my good friend Kwame and I worked a lot together in the last parliament when I was just a member of the finance committee, that we have actually completed drafting the national policy. And we are going to do a public participation, because every piece of legislation, including even what we're discussing now, the finance bill, Article 118 of our constitution mandates Parliament to conduct public participation. Yeah. So we are opening the conversation, fine. This is our idea. And if yours is a better idea than our idea, we're going to listen. Because at the end of the day, Trevor, we just want our country to work. We want to create jobs for our country. We do not want to borrow more. We have borrowed enough. We cannot borrow anymore. We want to bake more cake so that there can be enough for development and for job creation and for everyone in the Republic of Kenya.
All right, let me bring up some of the feedback coming through from your viewers at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. Let's see what you're saying before we take closing remarks from my panelists. This conversation will not end now. It's something we'll keep talking about. Chipodari Harris says, what happens to a civil servant with less than 5 years in service? What happens to a person who's already serving a mortgage and has a house? What happens to one who has committed all or his salary on loans? Can these deductions be optional? Kuria, very fast. What happens to one who has committed all of his salary on loans? What happens to someone who already has a mortgage and already has a house? Can these deductions be optional?
We are opening this conversation because we're not operating, Trevor, on a vacuum. We want to have a national discourse, and I'm very happy that we are even engaging in this very good debates. And that's why I said, if you check today's ads, as per Article 118 of our Constitution, we are opening this matter to public debate. We want this, our great idea, to give birth to an even much better idea. And that's why we are willing to engage. But however, we should also remember that we want a collective, we want to move with as many of us as we can. And therefore, it may not be really possible to take into consideration the individual cases. But we will attempt in our report to accommodate those particular people so that can be accommodated, but carry the general bigger picture. We make sure we have a national hospital, national housing fund that's up and running. We make sure that we convert our country into a construction site so that we can create jobs, so that our businesses can grow. We want to expand our tax base. We want it to make it very simple for that person who has a furniture business in Molo, so that they do not have to fear when a KRA officer comes to visit their premises.
Honorable.
Because they have a simple, predictable tax environment.
Direct question, Honorable. Direct question. question is, if the recommendation from the people that you're taking the memorandum from is that this tax has to be optional, will you take it?
Trevor, I have been in this parliament serving my second term. We have made drastic decisions as a parliament, and this is not going to be any exception. The public participation we are doing for the people is not cosmetic. We are carrying out public participation to hear the views of the people and find out whether even when we know that ours is a great idea, if someone has a much better idea, we're willing to accommodate it so that we can move with as many of us possible, so that we can move this country forward together. Because it's our country, Trevor. It's our country. We're going to make it work.
All right, let's bring up some of the more feedback coming through. Makabi says, well, to be sincere with myself, I'm a small business owner and paying tax is my obligation. What I don't understand is this. You pay tax, which I term high already, yet proposals are still coming in to increase it. If increased, many businesses will go down, and so who will pay the taxes? Okay? Bring up the next one. Let's see what you're saying here. Kebaki says, let the government stop taxing workers heavily, since the money they are paying now is enough to run the government's activities. Lastly, the taxes they have imposed on some things that were not taxed previously are enough to increase the government's funds. Okay? Let's see what else you're saying here. Ngure Ngati says, the new finance bill lacks equity. There seems to be over-reliance on formally employed Kenyans. We must match the same with growth of our economy. The same energy is needed in job creations. No shortcuts. Okay, Washika Ken says, we as Kenyans have never had an issue with paying taxes. Our major problem has always been how prudent our taxes are utilized. The government needs to cut on wasteful spending and focus on service delivery. Okay? Evans says, civil servants have the right to down their tools because the taxes are so heavy and punitive as compared to their salary income. I support their decision to down their tools. Okay, Babu Michael says, when prices of electricity, fuel, unga, sugar, cooking oil, etc. are high, and now the Kenya Kwanza government is targeting the already vulnerable pay slips with all sorts of taxes, will the purchasing power from Kenyans be the same? Will businesses make profits? Wanyonyi Morgan says, the increased tax system proposed by President Ruto will affect the common mwananchi. This is overtaxing. If they want more revenue, they should seek another way to better than this. This is punishing Kenyans. Yusuf says there is no point in mobilizing money through public taxation if the government cannot invest it effectively. It would otherwise be better to leave the money in the hands of private citizens to invest. Our government is wasteful, yet lifetime unemployment is real. Mark Ruaz says the Kenya Kwanza government is so obsessed with taxation. During campaigns, they were talking about lowering the cost of living. The proposed finance bill is oppressive and an insult to the suffering wananchi. Who will speak for mamambogas and hustlers? Chaplain says increasing taxes and taxing everything without subsidies and tax reliefs has a negative output in the economy. The shilling will lose the least value it has, and life won't be as easy as the government of the day promised it would be. Gladson says paying taxes is part of our role as patriots, but now taxing anything for the sake of it is now what hurts the economy even more, because it's not right to tax everything when we actually are struggling to meet even the basic human needs. The president and team need to reconsider. Okay, let's take a last one here. Musavi says, however good taxes are, overtaxing is immoral. The salaried are going to have a negative pay. The ripple effect shall be enormous. I'm for 2 or 3 types of taxes. What happens to taxes that have no reference office? All right. So there are quite a number of proposals here. I'll run you through them really quick and see what else is left here before I take closing remarks from my guests here. You can give your memorandum to the National Assembly by either directly or via email. Turnover tax now, previously 1% on sales above 1 million. Now it's 3% on gross sales above 500,000. That's one of the things we talked about earlier on there. There's still more digital tax at 15%, withholding tax for digital content creators. One of the things that people are saying that now, the opposition actually was saying that it is going to oppress the current creatives. Allowance taxation, 30% on per diem on every allowance that is given to the citizens who are working out there. Fuel levy, they're going to restore the 16%. This is another contentious issue. In fact, this is what Faisal Ahmed had earlier on explained. And there's still more. The total now general deductions are going to be at around 52%. So NHIF at 2.7, NSSF 6%, housing 3%, pay as you earn if you're earning more than $500,000 is 35%. This is a 52% taxation. And then there's the 16% of VAT anytime you go and buy anything anywhere. So the taxation increases more than that. Kwame, final remarks on this. So where do we go from here? We are caught between a rock and a hard place. What are your recommendations to the National Assembly? Because that's what they've asked for, recommendations from the people.
Well, I think let's just be guided by the Constitution. And if you read the Constitution, there's nothing that says that taxes have to be high, or even the belief that if government wants a certain level of taxes, that's it. So I think the National Assembly is right to say we should send in our proposals about what we want. And there's nothing also in the economics textbooks that says taxes have to be increased based on the emotions of the moment. I would think that opening up this conversation to look at each tax level and actually ask whether it is justified or not is one thing, is a useful thing. But more importantly, income is actually earned before it is paid over to the government. So if you're going to affect people's ability to earn that income in the first place, or even shrink some markets because some markets get lower and all that, then obviously we need to compare what government says it's going to do with that. But I don't believe at all on the housing or housing, if we have not created jobs from 14 million households, houses, right? And the big tower blocks running in Nairobi, who tells you that constructing 1,000 units in Siaya County is going to create jobs? We're lying to ourselves.
Okay. Joy, closing remarks. What will you recommend to Parliament?
Looking at this, I'm reading a lot of pressure to raise money, to raise revenue, to service debt. And some of this pressure, to me, it appears like it could be external. And because of all that, we are having the wrong conversation. This conversation about how do we raise revenue is a wrong conversation to have as Kenyans, because at the end of the day, we want to ask revenue for what? So as Kenyans, the right conversation should be, how can we strengthen the economy and build resilience and improve well-being for Kenyans? If we looked at that conversation from there now, even whoever is pressing us from external forces, we can sit down and say, now, let's be rational. This is our interest as Kenya, to strengthen the economy, build resilience, and improve livelihoods. What can we do from here? Okay. And then we sit down and look at all this, the finance bill, and see what is it that is likely to undermine the economy that we want to strengthen, and do something about it.
Right.
It's a conversation we need to have with ourselves and with our partners.
Right.
And together we can find a solution that works for us as Kenya.
All right. Honorable Kuria, your closing remarks on this. Now that you're the majority in Parliament, will this just pass without any amendments?
Again, I repeat what I said. We are not doing public participation in vain. We want to persuade our friends across the political divide. We want to persuade Kenyans. We are here to explain what we are doing to debunk the finance bill, to look what are the great things that we have put there. And again, Trevor, like the things I've talked about, we have removed the taxes on LPG gas, we have removed inflation adjustment that makes sure that our excess duty becomes predictable. We're expanding our tax base by making it very simple for small businesses to pay their taxes very easily and in a way that it's simple and they understand. We are providing amnesty to those people that have penalties and interest that has accrued over the years, so that we can look, because Trevor, out of 849 million companies that are actually registered for income tax, only 75,000 are actually compliant and are paying those taxes. So we have around 90% of companies out there that have a potential to do business, to transact, but they are not, because they have cases with the interest and penalties. We're extending an olive branch to them. We are telling them, come, let's apply for this amnesty and go back and do business, because we know once they go back to profitable business, then we are going to provide for employment. On the housing fund, Trevor, I repeat for the 10th time, it is not a tax. In fact, it is a boost to our salaried people, because the employer has to contribute 3%. And when I hear the conversation, then the salary will be the employer will set the salary as less than 3%. Even with the NHIF and SSF, we do not negotiate with saying that some of us, most Kenyans don't even know how much the employers pay in terms of the NSSF matching. NSSF matching, you start earning your money at 30, for example, and you can only get it when you hit 60. You know, a whole 30, 40 years later. But you're saying these funds will be accessible back to you in 7 years. And this is one program that doesn't just put more money into the savings of these Kenyans, but most importantly, builds houses. Most importantly, creates employment. Most importantly, standardizes the kind of houses we do, because that we will find the cost of housing will go down. The cost of those people that will be building houses privately will go down.
Yeah.
Because you can walk to any shop and there's going to be a standard door. There's going to be mass production. It also means that even the cost of rent is going to go down.
Okay.
We have even, Trevor, reduced even our rental income tax from 10% to 7.5%, hoping to have not just better compliance, but hopefully the landlords would transfer this particular benefit to the tenants, and hopefully get to reduce the cost of rental of houses, the cost of renting houses in this country, to bring it down, so that we have more disposable income available to our Kenyans, so that we can grow and live a much better life. Again, we welcome your views. We're very happy with what you're saying. Let us continue this conversation. We are here to make sure this country gets to work, because it's our country and we're going to make it work.
All right, the economists disagree. They say it doesn't necessarily work like that, but let's see. This is a conversation that is open now. You have until the 20th to give in your memorandum, talk about what's going on and your views of the finance bill. We have